slight curvature to the spine, that's pretty easy, in all honesty. And so it's just, a lot of people, it's more so either like they were born with it or they've had it since they were like so young and they kind of grew into it and allowed it to become way more calcified, that you have to take time when it is fully calcification to get the calcium back into the bones and their structure wanting to reform, because they're not accustomed to it at all. So it's changing that muscle memory over. So as we just read though with this spine treatment, there's not a lot of steps to it. But the spine is very thorough. Like, it takes a long period of time. If you're doing somebody's thorough spine, and you're going to take about 90 minutes, because each individual vertebrae take a bit to open up. Generally, we're born with 33 vertebrae, and over time, yes, as we age, things do naturally fuse. A lot of people say like we go down to like 22. That's pretty brutal, because then we know that like this whole area is starting to kind of get jacked up and start to get calcified, because then I know like the lumbar section and the sacral section coming down into the coccyx is frozen. And then that would be like called naturally fused. We can unfuse that. You can fix it by going in there and removing the scar tissue, getting more mobility in the spine, because the spine has 4 ways it can move. It can move forward, backwards, and then it can twist side to side. And so as we're doing the spine, like I said, there's 33 vertebrae that are technically there. But some of them, you're not going to feel 33 immediately off the bat, because some of people will have that spinal stenosis, the narrowing of the discs, and then some natural fusion happening in between. So it'll feel like almost 2 to 3 vertebrae might be together. It almost feels flush. And so then I know I won't be able to get in between the spinous process super well, that I'll have to grind along the side of it. So as we were reading, it doesn't have too many steps, but it must be done thorough. So we have these large muscles on either side of the spine. Those are the erector spinae muscles. We touched on it when we were up here and a little bit when we did the low back. But these erector spinae muscles come down into that multifidus, and this area needs to be stripped first before we even come into the vertebrae itself, because I want to do the muscles inserting at it, causing it to be in that contraction. So I'm always going to start face-to-face for the comfortability of the client. And then also we have origin and insertion. It's like the top of the rope and the bottom. That can vary depending on the issue. Remember, we have scoliosis, that goes from one side or the other. We have the lordosis, where it's inverted more in the low back, and then we have kyphosis, where they're kind of hunchback more so up here. And then that can feed into a Dowger's hump. But if I'm looking at somebody's spine and I'm generally like kind of gauging it, I want to also ask, what kind of injuries have you had? Because if she's gotten in a car crash and her head went in through a windshield, she had trauma to the top of her head. So then I know that the actual insertion is going to be C1 and the occipital condyles up in the skull a little bit. But if she says, oh, nothing, I've jarred my low back and I feel like more tension within like maybe lower thoracic and lumbar section, I know that origin is going to always be the sacrum, but then insertion will then be C7. So you have to see what their issue was. Was it from the top of the whip? Like, see if, you know, when you crack a whip, you see how it like gives you that like whiplash. So if it's something where they've had like a bunch of concussions or whiplash or damage to the top of the skull, then insertion is going to be the C1 and the occipital condyles. And if it's just like spinal issues, they're not too sure. Maybe they've like had a couple falls in their life, but nothing really hurts, nothing too much around the head area. I know that the insertion will be cervical 7. And that'll be kind of like the rope. I want to touch at the top and the bottom of the rope to give more slack in the middle. So far, so good? Okay. So we're going, as we go to begin, after I do origin for about a minute or two right on the sacrum, come up to the insertion, just say it's C7. After I work around the sacrum in C7, then I'm going to begin. And I start with the erector spinae muscles. Since the spine lays in the middle, remember how I said when we're doing like low back and upper back, you start on the better side? When we're doing the spine, it sits in the middle. Even if it's curved to one side, I know I'm going to have to focus on one side more than another. Like if the spine curves, just say to the right, and I see it out here over the right, I'm going to focus on the left side first because I'm going to loosen off the area I'm going to try to push it back into. And then I'm going to do the side where it's heading out, and then I really focus on stripping that and then pushing the spine back. And then afterwards I do a little bit of like finger manipulation.